going to ask Lam if you could just run this clip right now, and we can get going. I don't know whether you have it, Lambi. If you haven't got it, maybe Sherwin can help you with it.
Family listeners and friends of Dominica. Tonight, our distinguished guests are Dr. Reverend Andre, former Prime Minister Edison James, UWP President Lennox Clinton, and UWP Team Dominica leader and financial economist Dr. Tom Fontaine, of course, all illustrious sons of Dominica. I just want to say that we get a final opportunity to say our last goodbye to Cardinal Kelvin Phillips, a great human being, and really, we're going to miss him. I've known him for a very, very long time. And of course, we have to take the opportunity to give a huge shout out now to Father Herman Chaplin. He's our brother. Happy birthday, bro. Here are a few talking points for tonight, Matt. It continues to be all about the crisis, as you said, the crisis of electoral reform, why we must be worried. We will uncover, or as we say in local parlance, démasser any plot to change Dominica. We will dissect the evidence. We will see if and how the targeting of our democratic institutions reveals any sinister plot to destroy Dominica's democracy. This is the program that you cannot afford to miss. Everything will be revealed on the electoral reform, on the electoral commission, and as regards the chief election officer. My guests will certainly shine more light and give us some more insight than we already know on any inconsistencies, any contradictions, and betrayals contained in the new lopsided electoral reform legislation being proposed by the DLP regime, allegedly to maintain the election-winning legacy of its self-proclaimed outgoing leader at any cost. So will passport sellers betray the trust of the people of Dominica? Will the commissioners stand up and be counted by rejecting the regime's interference in the electoral processes? Or will the silence of Dominicans help to choke Dominica's democracy? Or will the people stand up to this month of June 2024 and tell the commissioners and the regime in office in no uncertain terms that they mean business and are ready to fight the good fight for the reforms that they want and for the free and fair elections that they desire? The people of Dominica, I believe, cannot allow the DLP regime to dictate to the Electoral Commission. The people seem ready. I have to say the people appear to be ready to tell the DLP regime to leave the Electoral Commission and the Chief Elections Officer alone so that they can do their job independently without political interference. Democracy truly appears to be in peril right now as we speak. It appears that the people of Dominica, however, will not allow any new legislation to create what some describe as a false pretender Dominica Labour Party dynasty that may mushroom into an autocracy on the path to sliding down the slippery slope into a full-fledged dictatorship. We may all be shocked at what some discern that the regime may have in store for Dominica. So it continues to be all about the fierce urgency securing the reformed electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations and stopping autocracy in its tracks right now through people's power. Yes, through people's power. It is understandable that ERC and UWP would be mobilizing for people's action in that regard. We look forward to seeing what happens there. My guests will hopefully talk to us about that. I'm sure that most right-thinking people are now saying enough is enough. It is time to relieve the rampant unemployment, the sidelining of local contractors and other service providers through no-bid contracts to foreign companies while Dominican contractors stand aside and look. And it is time also to stop the ongoing willful persecution of opposition leaders and independent thinkers. Time to end the victimization, the discrimination against people with a different opinion. Most Dominicans are now convinced that enough is really enough. As we always say, sitting on the fence or hiding in the shadows can no longer be a part-time pursuit, far less a full-time strategy. So my guest, Dr. Irving Andre, former Prime Minister Edison James, UWP President Lennox Clinton, UWP Team Dominica leader and financial economist Dr. Thompson Fontaine, will share share their views on these and other issues, and we will engage with you, our fellow Dominicans and friends of Dominica, decide on actions for the way forward to secure free and fair elections, which will result in good, accountable, and transparent governance, and hopefully return Dominica to the path of democracy and respect from the regional and international community. So, Matt, I hope tonight that everyone will tune in, and I hope you'll be able to tune in yourself. Let's see what we can learn from each other tonight on the Global VMQ from 8 o'clock. I think so that from the word I'm hearing on the ground, the most right-thinking people are really saying this is enough. We've had enough of this. It's time to get back to normal. What happens? Why can't Dominica be normal like all the other islands surrounding us, like Antigua and St. Kitts and St. Lucia? They had their reforms. It didn't take 15 years. It maybe took less than 6 months to do that. Why is Dominica taking 15 years to have its reforms? So these are the things that, in any event, Matt, one of the things that reforms do, they create a level playing field. So anybody can win an election and form a government. Dominica has not been able to change it for 24 years. That tells you something, doesn't it?
So yes, and my guest tonight will certainly share their views on the imperative to reform our electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations through peaceful people's power actions. Yes, peaceful people's power actions. It is time to put the brakes on young people having to flee their country because the poor economy gives them little hope as Dominica collapses every day in the current corrosive, self-serving policy environment. So we all look forward to everyone playing a meaningful role in ensuring appropriate reform of Dominica's electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations to secure free and fair elections. So tonight, my distinguished guests will make some suggestions as to where Dominica should go from here to see native Dominicans prosper rather than very talented youth being displaced and losing their heritage. So it is imperative that all Dominicans embrace national unity now for people's action now, this month of June, hopefully. All hands on one deck to secure good, caring, effective, accountable governance in our nature isle. Enough, uh, yes, really, enabling the ordinary Dominicans to make a decent living and to improve their living conditions and the quality of life. Stop these tidal waves of Dominicans fleeing from their serious problems, of the inability to pay their bills, take care of their families in their country, while they watch foreigners and foreign contractors get richer and richer. So we invite you, our Q family friends of Dominica, to stay with us on the various platforms on radio, TV, in Dominica, on our live stream on the internet, on Facebook and YouTube platforms, and have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, on the Global View on Q, only on the big station. Our usual huge shout out, hugs, and love and appreciation, and big thank you to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, public and private sector patriots at home and abroad. So we welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Again, we say thank you to Sherwin for keeping us on the air tonight. Thank you, Lambi, on the console as usual, directing the telephone traffic. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. So call us anytime during the program. Lambi will take your calls. He will just give us a little signal whenever you call. So these are a few of the talking points I'm putting on the table here tonight on the Global View and Q. So let's now get started. And to begin, I go to Dr. Evan Andre for his opening remarks to get the ball rolling tonight. Dr. Andre?
Yes, good evening, Mr. G. Thank you for inviting me to break some bread, literally and figuratively, with some distinguished Dominicans. Let me thank those who facilitated this discussion, i.e., Lambi and Sherwin. And let me say good evening to your great listeners, your dedicated supporters in this enterprise or this journey towards self awareness and hopefully redemption. As we speak this evening, obviously, many Dominicans throughout the day and in previous days were going about their business, earning a living, whether they are farmers, whether they own livestock and whether they are itinerant shopkeepers, whether they're working NEP type type work and so on. Fisher folk who certainly go out into the sea and bring their catch to the seashore, and upon arrival, they engage in the sometimes excruciating ritual of gutting the fish before selling it to the public and in the process earning a modest living. But even as they engage in that ritual of gutting the fish and throwing out that which is not desirable, their counterparts in the financial center are gutting a fish of their own. But unlike the fisher folk, they are throwing away the good part and they're keeping that, the intestines, and the part which normally have no type of use from the perspective of nourishment. And the fish that these folk are gutting, particularly on about the Attorney General's office, is Sir Dennis Byron's report. What they have done based on these three pieces of legislation, they have gutted that report, the reforms produced or suggested or recommended by Sir Byron, and instead they have replaced it with what that which is most undesirable. And I see that because the three or four most important reforms suggested by Sir Byron are conspicuous by their absence in this, well, in this slate of three pieces of legislation, three bills that they've produced. The first, the composition of the Electoral Commission. So Byron, you may recall, recommended an expanded commission to ensure that the imperatives of fairness and electoral integrity that is preserved. They have thrown that out of the window. So Byron proposed at least a modest slate of reforms aimed at limiting campaign finance spending. That also was thrown into the Foncole rubbish dump. And that was done for the most cynical of reasons, to ensure that everyone, anyone, irrespective of whether that person has a nefarious background, can contribute to Dominica's elections. It's somewhat interesting that we're discussing this today because only a day or two ago, you had two Chinese nationals who were deported, I believe, from Singapore and deported to Cambodia, and they were found to be in possession of two Dominican passports. So you have persons, as long as they have a Dominican passport, they do not have to meet the residential requirements of our current existing legislation. Once they are on the electoral list, they are eligible to vote with few exceptions. And that is the recipe that this government aims to foist upon us. The whole question of bribery, they've refused adamantly to specifically note that bringing in persons from abroad with an clear, express, or implied intention to vote for that a particular party or a particular individual constitutes the offense of bribery. So they have failed to introduce a modicum of protection of the integrity of our legislation. It has also been noted that even with the token reform of having voter ID cards, they failed to institute or to make any mention of those details, such as biometric data, which would ensure that, in fact, the person voting or the person who claims to be the person indicated in the voter ID card is that person because of the absence of that biometric information. And so here we are today, faced with this slate, which can only be described as an electoral banquet for a dictator. All the choice pieces of meat, the choice ingredients, the choice morsels of food are on that table set for a dictator. There is nothing more to it, and that is what we face. This is not hyperbole. This is not simple exaggeration. This, sadly, is the reality. And once again, we ask this question: where in the Eastern Caribbean? Have we, has any island or any leader or any government produced a more cynical and capricious slate of reforms as what is being presented today in masking under a hideous mask of modernization? The whole thing is a sham. The whole thing is a fraud. And quite frankly, Dominicans who are already grappling with the terrible effects of having a government stay in power illegally for over 20 years will be impoverished even more. Let me ask you two questions, Mr. G. Why do you think we have not seen the observers report? The observers who were in Dominica last, was it September, listening to the procession of acolytes singing from the same hymn book. Why have we not seen the report produced by these observers, including a representative of the OS? Let me ask you another question. You remember that two of your participants this evening were charged for incitement or arising out of an incident in 2017, if my recollection is correct, where patriotic Dominicans were protesting, as is their right, in front of the financial center. These two persons and others were charged with incitement. A senior member of the Jamaica Defense Force was commissioned to do a report on the genesis of the disturbances which ensued later that evening. Why do you think that report has not been produced? Let me say this. If that report had corroborated the evidentiary basis of these cynical charges, it would have would have been heard throughout the whole world, to the four corners of this world. Similarly, the Sir Byron's report, quite frankly, you remember Lennox Linton, I don't know if he's here this evening, was challenged that he should join with the Prime Minister so that as soon as Sir Byron produced his report, they would take it to the Parliament to be made into law. And what have they done to it? They have eviscerated it. They have gutted it. And you know the fundamental problem, Mr. G? I know that you're a high-end shopper. When you go to those high-end stores and you don't like some items, you bring it back and you get your money back. Can we bring back that Sir Byron electoral report and ask for a refund as we are entitled to receive? The answer is no. Yet again, significant sums of Dominican money, taxpayers' money, are being squandered and frittered away, while persons up to today cannot even cover their roofs, let alone buy insurance, which the political directorate is boasting about having. Yet again, Dominica is shafted in every way, in every shape, in every form. And the fundamental question remains, what are we doing to protect ourselves and our future? And on that note, I pause. Thank you.
Yes, and on that note, let me just say that first of all, the two questions you asked, there's somebody famous that says, this is not, this is above my pay grade. So the answers to those questions, I will defer to a former prime minister to answer those two questions. But certainly, I don't think we'll ever see those reports. Why? Because it's obvious that they're not favorable to the political directorate. If they were favorable, oh God, you'd hear them all over the place, right? So Mr. Edison James, as I said, his pay grade is way above mine. I'm going to go over to him now so he can try to answer those questions if he could, and then to give us his opening remarks on some of what we're talking about here tonight, Dr. Andre. Mr. James, if you could unmute your mic, and then thank you. Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sheridan, Mr. G. Dr. Andres, good to see you again, and to know that you're in such fine spirits. Lambi, I said hello to you earlier, but I was told by Mr. Gregor that you were not hearing me. So let me say good evening to you, and good evening to the listeners and viewers. I'm happy to be here with you this evening just to share some thoughts. But it is a very painful occasion and exercise because we've gone through this for so long. This journey started, I think, way back in 2005 when at a rally of my party, the United Workers' Party in Newtown, we invited a guest speaker, Shaku Simister from Antigua. Antigua, the UPP of which he was a part, I think he was chairman at the time, had assumed the office of government, the UPP, yes. They had become the government after the party before them had been there for some 20-something years. And I remember having breakfast with the then Prime Minister Baldwin Spencer, who, among other things, I remember him saying, Edison, in the absence of electoral reform, we would never have won elections. We were having breakfast at the Fort Young. And that has resonated with me for a long time. And I suppose there are others who recognize that they could stifle the electoral reform, which is so patently necessary, and thereby ensuring that they never lose elections. But, you know, I'm reminded that our Constitution, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica, in that Constitution, somewhere, it tells us that the people of Dominica have asserted their belief in a democratic society and that men and institutions remain free only when such freedom is founded upon the rule of law. I remember years ago, my sister had received a prize as part of a course, at the end of a course that she had attended in Barbados. And that particular dictionary, there was a definition there of democracy. And it said, democracy is not suited to Negroes. I've always remembered that. I can't put my hand on that very version. I've never seen it in another version of a dictionary. And I suppose the powers that be now, led by Roosevelt Skerrit, seem to believe that democracy is not suited to us. But Dominicans asserted their belief in a democratic society. Democracy cannot come about in the absence of free and fair elections. Democracy is wrapped up, entwined by free and fair elections. So we have standing before us the triplet: democracy, free and fair elections, and the rule of law. I think Dr. Andre mentioned the word dictator a while ago. When I was a young boy and I heard the word dictator, it frightened me. Every bone in my body was almost mulled because I associated democracy with Hitler, and I associated Hitler with the killing of so many people. So when I hear the word dictator, it frightens me. But sad to say, that is where we are in Dominica. Because what we have is a situation where the people of this country who have asserted their belief in the democratic way of life, it's contained in the Constitution, and recognizing that that democracy is steeped in, wrapped up in, guided by, directed by free and fair elections. And we have a leader in our country, of our country at this time, who is determined that there will be no free and fair elections in Dominica. And as I said, this journey started some time ago, many, many years ago, when we, the United Workers' Party and others, embarked upon a mission to have the elements of free and fair election in our country brought about, identify those elements in the context of our country. The use of ID cards for voting and a complete re-registration, a complete cleansing of the list. These relatively two and simple actions or requirements is what was identified as key to us having free and fair elections. It is here that we must pause to remember that notorious email from one of the three people who control Roosevelt's garage. There are three people, in my estimation, who control Roosevelt's garage, and by extension, the 65 or 70,000 of us who live in Dominica. Anthony Hayden, Hartley Henry, a gentleman called Dev Bath, and Anthony Astafan. Interestingly, none of those three is resident in Dominica. None of those three is affected by the mismanagement, by the excesses of the regime led by Mr. Skerritt. But they are the controllers. So that notorious email is what is driving the actions of Roosevelt Skerritt. What was it said? What the essence of that said, of that email? That these fellas at the commission are talking about electoral reform, and they talk about ID cards and complete re-registration. This will damage your legacy of winning elections. This is, Sheridan, I don't know whether you can find a way to let that be known throughout the country, just as we know our national anthem and our pledge. That email, in the context of electoral reform, it needs to be on the lips of everybody. We should know it by heart, right? That it will damage your legacy. So we have had, in the context of this mission to get electoral reform, we've had consultants come in here. We've had observers from the Commonwealth, from the CARICOM, from the OAS, from every and anywhere. We've had consultations, island-wide consultations. We have had a sole commissioner. He's had another name, the legal luminary. We've had civil society representatives. All these people, individuals, have sought to address this question of electoral reform and therefore free and fair elections, free and fair elections. All those consultants, all those observers, all those luminaries have recommended, have advised on the approaches which should be taken to have free and fair elections. Dr. Andre mentioned a while ago the complete absence of anything from the observers who observed the island-wide consultations which we had a few months ago, from the CARICOM, from the OAS, from the Commonwealth. Nothing. I understand they have submitted their reports, but I think I agree with Dr. Andre and Sheridan yourself when you suggested that had those reports said anything that was favorable and was pointing to what we have seen coming out from Mr. Skerritt and his people now, we would have been hearing about it from the mountaintops. But what was the response of the administration to all those consultants and observers and so on, and the Dominicans who gave their views, go to hell. Go to hell. And even if we have not heard that expression in the context of how Mr. Skerritt is treating us now with this move with respect to the electoral reform at this stage, even if we have not heard those words, his actions are telling us that go to hell, go to hell. And I mentioned earlier the rule of law. When we talk about the rule of law, we're talking about our courts. The highest court available to us has said that the elections 2019 were tainted, but they said more than that. They urged, they advised, they recommended that elections should not be held. Future elections should not be held with those taints that they identified. What did Mr. Skerritt do? Within a few months of that advice and guidance from our highest court being given, he went into elections again, clearly indicating a complete disrespect for the rule of law. So what happens when a people have decided that in the context of their democracy, there's a certain path they want to follow to ensure that that democracy is established and maintained? Stumbling blocks are put in their way. So they go to the court seeking the support of the rule of law. And the court rules in the people's favor, you might say. And the dictator says, to hell with the court. So to hell with the people, to hell with the court. What do the people do in that situation? Well, the very court, and I don't have the court, but I see Lennox is here, he'll help me. The very court has reminded us of what happens in a situation where democracy is gutted and where the rule of law is disregarded. The court reminded us that in that situation, those situations, you have riots. You have riots. That is where the people of Dominica are being pushed, I hear people are asking, what do we do? And what is the opposition doing? And what is so and so? It's not the opposition who's going to do, it's the people who will do. And when the people try everything that is peaceful, that is within the law, and they're being told by words and action, go to hell, then the people will decide enough is enough. I heard Dr. Andre mention two of the guests on the program being before the court. Well, I know three were announced to be on the program, and those three are before the court. Thomas Fontaine, the political leader of our party, Lennox Linton, the president of our party and immediate past political leader, and myself, a trustee of the party. We have all been politically persecuted. I know there's another word called prosecuted, but we've all been persecuted. I ended up in the jail the other day. That's another story. But that's what happens. I told you earlier about my concern about a dictator. Dictators kill people. Persecuting people and putting them in the jail is not killing people, but it's one step in that direction. So, Dominicans, that is where we are. That's the path on which we are, where we have a government in place now that refuses to respect the wish of the people with respect to the democratic system under which they wish to live, and has decided that those people who are trying to tell you and open your eyes about what is happening, that they will be dealt with. And we will start with persecuting them. We'll start with putting them in jail, but we might end up killing them. Is that what we want? But that path that Mr. Skerritt and those who advise him advising him are on, that path, they are emboldened because they believe that they have the police there with them. So the police will be used to deal with the people who are trying to open the eyes of the Dominicans. It is my caution to the police that they should not allow themselves to be used by this dictator. And I'm not going to say would-be dictator. When a man can decide, I am not going to listen to any of you. I paid $600 and $700 million to Mr. Byron and his friend to do whatever. I've thrown it aside, and I'm going to do what I always wanted to do and what I always intended to do. I'm not listening to you. Don't expect me to have any further discussion with you. That is the essence, the element, the core of a dictator. Question is that what you want? But you better take warning. There's a song like that, Mr. Derby. You better take warning.
Yes, I heard Dr. Andre singing it this morning.
Right. Okay. So we better take warning, because it is not alarmist. It is not out of this world. Mr. Ostry, who is a senior member of the ruling party, was at the time, urged that Mr. Linton be kidnapped. You remember that? Those who are listening to me, remember that?
I remember
Mr. Ostry urged that Mr. Linton be kidnapped.
Disappear him.
Disappear him. That is kidnapping him. But we know, we have heard, at least it's been alleged that our Prime Minister, our Minister of National Security, and our Chief of Police were involved in kidnapping exercise in Dominica. That is an allegation. I'm sure there are people who might be prepared to come forward and confirm that. We've heard that allegation. Those people I've mentioned have never denied it. So it is not far-fetched when we say that those of us who are involved in the advocacy for a democratic way of life to be maintained, to be championed, that we are in danger. And you, the people of Dominica, you are in danger. So what do we do? It's my opening comments. But what we do right now, some time ago, we came out with a suggestion to the people of Dominica that they should do nothing. I think it was on your station that Randy Rodney asked me in the context of my incarceration what I think the people should. I said they should do nothing. And perhaps the people should start by doing nothing. By doing nothing. So I'm not urging the people to go and get in any violence. But I'm saying to the people, I'm not a trade unionist. I do not have the authority to tell people to withdraw your labor, but just do nothing. That is where your power is. Imagine your power is in doing nothing. Think about it. And if this gentleman, if Roosevelt Skerrit and those who are directing him, not advice, directing him, insist that they must trample over you, trample over your rights, trample over your democracy, then you have to consider as a people on a continuing basis, do nothing. But not only the regular people, Sheridan, in 79, and one of the reasons I understand that they have cited us for, at least me, for incitement is because at that gathering in 2017, I referred to what happened in 79. And it seems it is criminal for you to mention what happened in 79. Well, it can't stop me from dealing with history, okay? So I'm only urging that what you have now, the power you have now in your hands as a people, is to do nothing. All of us just do nothing and just continue to do nothing and see where it takes us. Sure, then that's by way of my opening comments. I'll come back later to some more details.
Yeah, thank you so much for these opening comments, Mr. James. You put some questions here to ask, And when I go to Mr. Lennox Linton, which I'll be doing very shortly, maybe he can chime in on some of those, because, he's a very young fellow, but he may have been around for 79. I don't know. He'll tell us. But I was there, and the question of doing nothing, That is something that was done, but there were other things done as well besides doing nothing. I'm not going to mention any of those, but I think there's a gentleman called a senior counsel who spoke about a constitutional cool wash brigade, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Lennox again, if his young brain can refresh my memory on that, but maybe Dr. Andrew as well. But then Lennox, let me just make an excuse, first of all, for Dr. Thompson Fontaine, who really could not make it. He's traveling. He's in between airports somewhere in the African continent over there. And so if he gets a chance and he gets Wi-Fi somewhere, he'll certainly call in and join us for a few minutes. But I get a feeling that, because when you communicated with me earlier, I get a feeling that he may not be able to make it. He would have been happy to be here in this kind of illustrious company. But Lennox, Mr. Edison James reminded us that it seems sometime in 2005 that this talk of electoral reform started. 2005. If my arithmetic is correct, that is something like what, 19 years?
Yes.
19 years.
Something like 19 years. Now, Lennox, you're a bright young fella. You've been to Antigua, you've been to St. Lucia, you've been to St. Kitts. Give us a reminder how long it may have taken them to do theirs. Did Antigua take 6 months to do theirs? Or did they take like 3 months, or whatever did they take? The point I'm trying to make here is that for 19 years, we're talking about electoral reform. We cannot get it. And are we still asking people what they're going to do about it? Because, Mr. James made it clear that, elections have consequences. But in order for them to have good consequences, they must be free and fair. We don't seem to be having free and fair elections for the very reason that Mr. James mentioned, which is that somebody wants to protect their election winning legacy, right? We all know that. And then, of course, Dr. Andre reminded us that democracy has been gutted. It's been gutted, and Mr. James also reminded us that the rule of law is being disregarded. People telling people, go to hell, it's none of your damn business. Disregarding the law. I can run for election even if I have a dual citizenship. You can't stop me. I don't care what the laws say. I don't care what the constitution says. I'm running. So, Lennox, the fact that we have all of this before us, and it is clear that things are not operating normally here, not in the same way that it operates in some of the islands in the region. And we can see what happens in the other islands in the region. Because they have in their electoral reform, because they have in free and fair elections, they're able to change their government from time to time. So we are stuck with a government for 25 years. The young people are suffering, people migrating like all over the place because they can't take it anymore. And then Chubby make all kind of songs and telling us the fact of life, but we're not listening to them. So let me hear you, Lennox, on some of that, because certainly the next move is, what are the people going to do about this?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sheridan. Good evening, Dr. Andre. Good evening, Honorable Edison James. Lambi, good evening to you, bro. And good evening to the people of Dominica listening at home and listening abroad. What you just outlined, Sheridan, is evidence of the struggle Dominica has had in the better part of the last 20 years, better part of the last 2 decades, with a calculated, brutal assault on Dominica's democracy. And Edison James has addressed it. Dr. Andrew has addressed it. The democratic state that we have chosen to live in, a key piece of which, a foundation piece of which, is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And government of the people, by the people, for the people necessitates free and fair elections in which the people with their majority votes of conscience decide who they want to govern periodically. And I want to spend a little time on this because I think it's important. Government of the people, which people? Our people. Our people, according to the Constitution, who are resident in Dominica, are above 18 and What's the other qualification? Citizens. The citizens of they're our people. They're citizens of Dominica. They are above 18 years, and they are living in a particular polling district in Dominica, because the right is to elect people to represent you in the parliament, meaning people to represent you in the governance of Dominica, so that the people are making those choices. Government of the people. But the people referred to in the supreme law are those are making the decisions, are those who qualify because they are 18 and because they are living in a particular polling district from where they can seek representation for their affairs in that polling district in the parliament of the country. So, government of the people, government by the people, meaning us, our professionals, our upstanding citizens who stand up to serve, stand up to provide the leadership and management in government for the best Dominica, for all the sons and daughters of Dominica. Of the people, by the people. The other dimension is for the people. So government has to be for the people. And we have a classic example in Dominica now of government that is not for the people. This government is for everybody else outside and for many outside interests, as opposed to being for the people. That is why the government can boast hundreds of millions of dollars leaving each year in construction jobs for outsiders working in Dominica, while Dominican carpenters and masons and plumbers are struggling for employment and for earning opportunities. They go elsewhere to find it. So you're supposed to have a government overseeing an economy that works for people, but that is not happening. The construct, the democratic construct, is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we're now on this for the people dimension, and you're seeing all of the different ways in which this government is not for the people. They've allowed the healthcare system to fall apart. They have brought thousands and thousands of people into poverty over the last 20 years by mismanaging the economy, by organizing it for outsiders and providing the opportunities for outsiders to build capacity while our people in Dominica are shut down. What has happened to the business community in Dominica? Where is the Dominica Association of Industry and Commerce? Where's the Dominica Employers Federation? Where are those enlightened institutions in the public space that for years and years were building a capacity to look after their affairs and to partner with government, the public sector, in the building of the country, in the building of the economy? Where are they? Where is the church? What has happened to the church? What has happened to the institutions of democracy that hold up this government for the people discipline? We have a very interesting situation where for the people means government that is accountable to the people. But you've heard from Edison James about go to hell. It's none of your damn business. And I'm not having any more consultations with you because this fish is already in the oil and it's frying and it's good. So where are we going with that? The democratic construct, government of the people, government by the people, government for the people with the majority votes of conscience of the people, has been systematically assaulted in the last 20 years, over the better part of the last 20 years. And that is the problem that we face today, because everything is falling apart because of that, because we have not taken care of, we have not protected the basic democratic construct for successful living in this democracy. So you see a situation now where after years and years of an electoral system, an electoral process, being subjected to the fancies and whims of one man and his gang, being hijacked by one man and his gang, being manipulated, being tainted by one man and his gang, so that they can do what they want to steal elections and to come out of elections with results in their favor every time. And what did they do with that? They take the power of the people to govern, and they pass it to their friends outside. Because it is those friends in the outside who are telling them and dictating to them what to do. So this is no longer government of the people. You have a few people who have hijacked the electoral process to take government and give it to outsiders, to give it to the control of outsiders. So we don't have government of the people. No, we don't have government by the people. And then in the question, the government of the people now, which is supposed to mean the people of Dominica living in Dominica, they are passing that right in the electoral system to determine results in elections to persons who are not ordinarily resident in Dominica, and therefore ought to have no interest in representation in governance of Dominica because they live in another jurisdiction. The construct is corrupted. That's where all the taints come from. And so the Caribbean Court of Justice admonishes us, after all of these years of advocacy for electoral reform, which really is advocacy for free and fair elections with integrity, a process, a system for that to happen, that it was very concerned about the taints that it witnessed on the electoral process in the 2019 elections, and future elections in Dominica ought not to be held with these or similar taints. When the OAS Observer Mission came to the 2022 election, sham election, snap election, called just about the time when the consultant was providing his recommendations on reform for the election that we should not have without removing the taints, the OAS said that it is clear Dominica cannot proceed to another election under these rules. The rules are the rules that were there before, which gave rise to all those taints and all those manipulations that saw the kinds of results we've been having in elections in Dominica. And so I want to say tonight that this is a time for Dominica to stand up, because we are in a situation of the people of Dominica and the people's right to elect their own government, the people's right to have a process for free and fair elections. Those rights and the people's interest are being assaulted by one man and his gang. So it is him versus the people of Dominica. And the people of Dominica, in my view, in my mind, have been dormant for too long. Yes, we have taken the civil approach. Yes, we have been at this for a very long time. But also, yes, it is time to get serious. It is time for the people to get serious about what belongs to them, what is their responsibility for this democracy that we hold dear. And to me, it can no longer be people sitting in the comfort of their homes, waiting to see which of their neighbors or their brothers and sisters or their cousins are going out to protest for rights that belong to all of us, and which we must rescue if this country is to go anywhere further, anywhere forward. We have to succeed with that rescue mission. The time is now. And you know some of the things that tell us the time is now? The dictator. They don't like to call him that. But who else dresses in $25,000 outfits? That an NEP worker must work for 2 years to get $25,000. But you can dress up in $25,000 outfits at a time and then tell the NEP worker, hello, you know that $1,000 that you're receiving every month, you're supposed to be able to save $200 on it, Now, the NEP worker is paying lights, the NEP worker is paying water, the NEP worker is paying for his internet service, the NEP worker is paying for his liquor TV, the NEP worker is putting money in his cell phone. None of these costs apply to the dictator. The state meets all of them for him, including his transportation cost, and then his fat salary on top of that, and then his $64,000 mansion. All told, the dictator is costing the state $125,000 a month, enough to pay 125 NEP workers at $1,000 each. And the dictator has the gall to say to the NEP worker, what is your problem with the $1,000? You should be able to save $200 on that. What is your problem? I mean, come on. I mean, don't you see me? Don't you see me enjoying life on my designer clothes, my $25,000 and $30,000 designer clothes outfits? Don't you see me just living it large? What is your problem? And you're dealing with dictators when they tell you one thing and they do something completely different, but they don't expect you to ask them any questions. So they come to you with all sorts of stories. Oh, well, we're going to save money to fix the debt. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Things at the hospital will get better. And nothing happens, but the debt rises. And life gets more and more difficult, more and more intolerable, more and more unbearable in so many respects, in so many aspects. And while that is happening for the people, the dictator and his gang are happy. They're large, they're in charge. And they tell you, we are going to give you electoral reform. Now, electoral reform is what electoral reform is. And there's some very discrete elements to it in our circumstances. But the dictator wants to tell you that what he wants for the process, which is deform, is actually reform. And you should ask him no question. So there's where we are. We have we have a distortion of the right to vote that is causing us to have a number of people who are not ordinarily resident in Dominica on the register of voters, corrupting the list and creating that pool of voters overseas that the dictator can use the public money to bribe with free tickets, with spending money to come to Dominica to vote. That's part of the corrupt way of stealing elections in Dominica, and the dictator will not let go of it. So we have no clear provisions against the bribery of transportation expenses. We have no clear provision in the law, proposed law, that is supposed to be electoral reform against free entertainment treating. We have no clear provisions for ID cards intended to deal with the fraud. We have voter ID cards, but no clear provisions for the inclusion of security features like biometric data and so on. Unique ID number, registration number, polling district. No provisions in the law for that. It's up in the air. We have provisions for access to DBS radio, but not all media. And the access to DBS radio is kind of iffy. You're not sure when it will happen, given the way the wording is. We have problems with the whole integrity of the system and obedience to the rule of law that will give us a process that we can trust. So everywhere you look at it, go to campaign finance, very important recommendations coming from the Byron consultancy, totally ignored, because of course, campaign finance regulation will interfere with the corrupt system, the crooked system that has been used to secure election results for the dictator. And so the time has come now for the people to decide enough. The dictator is not going to give up what he has. And perhaps over the years we have been too civil sitting down, waiting on a man who is benefiting from the exploitation of the public interest for his benefit to give it up willingly and to do the right thing by the people of Dominica.
So
It's a crucial time in our affairs, and I'll leave it here for now.
Yes, and Lennox, thanks for that. So let us go back to it, but I think Lambi wants to take a call. Lambi, you want to take a call now?
Yes. Caller, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, Lambi. Good evening to
Good evening.
all on the panel.
How are you doing?
Yeah, gentlemen, there's something that really bothers me. There are many things that bother me, and I don't know if we have enough time, but I'll try to tackle it. The electoral laws that are being made, yes, they are laws, but how are they being implemented in a timely fashion? In other words, if somebody shows up in Dominica and it is suspected that they're not residents, how quickly can you get him stopped from voting? You know, that along those lines, I'm thinking there should be clear-cut lines that decide whether or not this person is qualified to vote. And they should be able to be challenged when they come into the polling station. And if they don't meet those requirements, they should be pretty much treated like someone who's trying to break the law and dealt with. I know that's taking it far, and it hasn't probably been done. But the idea that you have to deal with it after the election and months and years pass after you make the complaint, that is not sufficient. There should be laws introduced that can deal with these matters in a timely fashion. You know, you come in, somebody complains that, hey, this guy hasn't been here, he just came in. He cannot be resident. Where is your residence? Can you show us your residence before you vote? Along those lines, I'm thinking, because if it's not that far, all these regulations that are made, they can just be walked over. People will just walk over them and they will not be really effective. Now, I'll leave it there because I don't want to delve into Mr. Skerritt's narcissism tonight. I'm just going to leave that alone for the night, gentlemen. Thank you.
And thank very, very good observation, extremely good observation. But let me just go back before I go to you, Dr. Andre. And Lambi, if you have a call, just interrupt us at any time. Let me just go back to a couple of things. First of all, now that the caller raised this little problem, I have a concern as well, because I mean, who is doing what? The chief elections officer is supposed to have a say in some of this. He's the one who handles the elections, right? Yes, you have a board of commissioners, but the chief elections officer, I think, is the person who deals with the day-to-day operations. And if, as the new law is, there is a concern, for example, that Dennis Byron may have recommended that the age for retirement of the chief elections officer should be, I think, 65 or something like that, he mentioned. But my understanding is that from the law that the government is recommending, it would be 55. So does it mean then that the government, the political directorate, through their majority on the board of the Electoral Commission, can simply say, listen, this guy, I'm not so sure where he stands. Like, will he do everything that I want him to do? So maybe we can retire him at 55. The law says 55, retire him and put somebody who will do my bidding. And then let some younger person do my bidding, put them there. This is something that is of concern. Obviously, it has to be of concern. The CCJ was concerned about things like that. But I want to go back and talk about a little bit before I go to you, Dr. Andre. What was mentioned by Lennox, for example, and Edison? Where are the people from the DEIC? Where are the people from the Employers Federation? Where are the civic groups? Where are the churches? Where are the public officers, like the teachers and the nurses and so on, and what firemen and so on? Why do I raise that? It's because we know where they were in 1979. They were all singing from the same hymn sheet. They were all together, and they said enough is enough, and some businesses actually closed their business and allowed their employees to go out and demonstrate. And so they were in 100% behind it, and that is why it had the momentum that it has. It's not because Mr. Sovereign was out there saying the nurses shall not work, the port shall not work. That would not have happened if people like Zaboka did not say, yes, I agree the port will not work. And the other people said, yes, I agree they will not work. But today, I think, Lambi, just tell the caller, hold on 1 second. Today we have bus drivers, we have equipment operators, we have contractors who not getting work. We're not hearing about where they are. I think it's about time that these people all came on board so that they can have a say in what's going on in the country. Lambi, let's take your call.
Yes, Lambert.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening again. Yeah, I just want to say that you can do bidding in both ways. Very similar to watching a man drown and doing nothing, because it seems that this commissioner is doing just that. He's not doing the bidding in an active way. He's doing it in a passive way, like he has not said anything. Has anybody heard anything from this gentleman? Nothing. How is that possible? How is it possible? I keep saying that. How is it possible that we're not hearing the voice of this man? Nothing. Has anybody heard? I'm asking a question. Has anybody heard from this man? In the heat of electoral reform, the man is not, he is passive. He has a babu chest. I've said it before. Roosevelt Skerrit has shut him up. And Roosevelt Skerrit has taken over his office, it appears. And I believe everybody will agree with me, because we have not heard a peep squeak from this gentleman. Thank you, gentlemen.
And thank you so much. Let me go over to Dr. Andre now, to maybe he can answer all those questions for us and put our minds at rest. And maybe, Dr. Andre, you can use your influence to reach out to the heavy equipment operators. If they, as Mr. James said, if they're not doing anything, certain things might not happen. And you can reach out to all the people in the public service and see if they will do nothing to, so something can happen. And all the bus drivers and all the teachers and the nurses and the churches and so on. You have influence on all of those sectors, I believe, Dr. And maybe you can help us out as to see what it is they can come on board to help us.
Mr. Gregoire, I think you are guilty of a case of mistaken identity in terms of the proposition that I have influence over all these wonderful folk and so on. If a few take action, then obviously they will be cut down. But if they act with great strength and unity, with great purpose and dedication and perseverance, and they stand on a footing of righteousness, then obviously they shall not be moved. But if they are picked off one by one, that is to say, teachers at a certain college launch an action, and after they get a pittance, they retreat to their positions of safety. Public servants get their 1%, and they retreat to a position of safety. And bus drivers get their 2%, and they retreat to a position of splendid isolation. Then obviously you'll never have change. You will never have change. Without consensus, without solidarity, without unity, no change will take place. And the question is, why is it that such intelligent persons haven't seen that truth that is staring them right down in the face? That truth that is hidden in plain sight? The answer is clear. Those folks who are suffering are their worst enemies, because they have made a pact with the devil. That is to say, if they keep quiet, and if they keep singing very softly, "How great thou art," what a wonderful hymn, they will continue to be mocked and told, "You can't afford insurance, although you are my employer." Where is your insurance? Where's your toilet paper when you go to the hospital? Where is your paracetamol? Where is the linen for the bed? Where is the food you bring for your own family or relatives or friend who is in the hospital? If their cries for better service are mocked or are disregarded or are dismissed, and you do nothing, then what do you expect? What do you expect? You must be good. Well, I hate to say it, but I don't mean it in a derogatory way. You must be good Catholics. You take your blows in silence. You suffer because suffering is redemptive. But bear in mind one thing. The 12 lepers who were saved, they didn't stay in their holes. They didn't stay in where they had been cast aside and wait for salvation to come to them. They went forth to the place where the person who could have redeemed them or cured them was waiting. So they took steps to redeem themselves and to save themselves. And to the extent that we are not seeing a lesson in biblical teachings, then we are doomed to perdition. Now, your good caller a while ago talked about who is checking on the residency component or the residency criterion for those voters who come from abroad. My friend, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Section 11 of the Registration of Electors Act, the proposed bill, says, quote, a person registered shall have his or her name remain unregistered unless deleted because of four circumstances. So the effect of that proposed section is that as long as your name is on that list, that's what I hate to tell you, nobody gives a damn about residency. And that is the perverse nature. I'll go further. That's the criminal nature of the reforms that these folks are proposing. So that if you're abroad and you bought passports and you're convicted, Singapore for money laundering, as long as your name is on the voters list, if it is, that's why you can vote. Nobody, no corporal, no inspector is going to find out what is the residence situation with respect to that prospective voter. So it is letting the cage loose, letting the plague of electoral rigging loose upon an unsuspecting population. And that is why you have folks talking about that with great gravity. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Andre. So Prime Minister, former Prime Minister James, I don't believe that the Dominicans whom I'm hearing calling Matt every day, talking about their light bills going up, talking about their water bills going up. Somebody said if they increased my water bill by 15 cents, I wouldn't be able to balance my budget because every cent is accounted for already. And what about these bus drivers? Are they going to ever get a meaningful increase? Will people be able to afford to pay them a meaningful fee? What about the public servants? Give me just 1 second, Lambi. Public servants, are they going to be able to get by every year on a 1% and a 0 and a 1 and a 2%? Let's take a call before I go to Mr. James.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Lambi.
Good evening.
And good evening to the entire panel. And a special good evening to a man I do not know that always says when he come whenever he's on the program, Dominican Pastor Garson. Mr. G, I want to make a short contribution. I doesn't stay long.
Okay.
But before I make that contribution, right, I want to tell you that all of us in that fight need to be appreciated. But Mr. G, when are we going to specifically appreciate Mr. Lennox Linton? He's not my friend, I don't talk to him. But I am on a first arrest list. I never heard they say go with me. The last time I heard you on the show with the Attorney General, I said you were the Attorney General. But nobody never said go with you, Mr. G. But we heard people saying, get rid of this man, he's a headache, go with him. Isn't that true?
Yes, you're right.
Mr. G, you hear me?
I'm hearing you. I said you're right.
Right. I'm asking you, whether if Dominicans in Dominica cannot do it, well, let's set up a date where we at this any diaspora can appreciate this man for his work. I listened to this man today, and I say, well, I'm at school. And again tonight, I'm at school. Let me make a short contribution as quick as possible. Mr. G, anytime you're on a program, I'm just begging, I'm admonishing, I'm beseeching you to read that email, the former Prime Minister. He used a word there. I know you're brilliant, Mr. G, but he used a word notorious. and I had to go and start and look at the word quick. I rather we use it than the word famous. That's just me, right? But I am saying to us, whenever we're talking about what Donny Dominica, this email, we talk about it, but let's read it, because some young people have never even heard about this email, no matter how long it exists. Because I sent this email to a young lady, her parents from Dominica, from La Plaine. And she said to me, she have never known nothing about this email. We need to read this email so that every young person will know that the reason why we are in this mess is because of this notorious or nasty, negative email. So tonight, I just want to congratulate you guys for doing a good job. And so there's a question Dr. Andrew is always asking. It behoves Dominicans now to know what they're going to do. Thank you for the opportunity, guys.
Well, thanks a lot. But before you go, I wanted to ask you a question. Would you come out if Mr. Lennox and the people ask you to come out to stand up for your rights and show you get the electoral reform you want? It's not just necessarily talking to you, talking to every Dominican, because as we said in 79, everybody was involved, and that is why it was successful. Because as Dr. Andre says, if one person tries to do it on their own, they're just going to get victimized. But if everybody is on the same wavelength in mass, nobody can touch them. Lamb, you want to take a quick call before we go?
Yes, caller, please go ahead.
Right. One thing I think everybody missing with what happened today with Roosevelt Kerry saying all that money he had. After the hurricane, the first thing he said, he brought in this guy from this guy because there was no money. He brought from MMCE. But everybody seems to forget that. He said there was no money. Today he claimed he had so much money. And nobody's reminding the people that Kerry said he had no money, that's why he brought in MMCE. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Great observation. Mr. James, you might be able to address that as well, because, I mean, obviously, the only reason why these people came in there is to keep Dominicans out of work. To me, since they came in, Dominicans have not been able to get work. Everything goes to foreigners.
No. Yeah, that is not true. What Mr. Skerritt said, that the reason why he brought MMC in is that the country had no money. Lennox has a sharper memory than me on this one, but he will tell you how much money it was reported that we had just before the Hurricane Erika, when I think it's after that Anthony Hayden came in. And that is not true. Like so many other things Mr. Skerritt has said, it's not true. But let me just address the listeners. Elections have consequences. Elections have consequences. And to the extent, you go to get a job, you go to look for a job, and no matter what you do, no matter how handsome, beautiful you are, no matter how physically fit you are, in the end, it's your performance that's going to decide whether you continue to hold on that job. And in the case of this politics we're talking about and governance and so on, it is the people who will decide whether they continue to allow you, whether they're going to allow you to continue in that job. And there are certain parameters, certain criteria, certain things they will look for. So how do the people take you out of that job? It's by their vote. And the voting is done within a certain construct, rules, regulations, and so on. But if you have so manipulated the process that you will never leave office, they can never take you out, then there's no need for you to perform, There's no need for you to perform. And you have every incentive to do what you want with the people. Don't deliver to them. Insult them how you want. Deride them how you want. Imagine Mr. Skerritt can say to people, what the hell are you doing with ice making fridge? Get your pan, your tin, put water in it and make your ice and use ice make. While he has 10 fridges delivering 1,000 cubes of ice every hour. How else can Mr. Skerrit feel comfortable to say to the people in front of him, I have insurance. Yeah, got it. So when he pierce insurance, suck we sort. And we clap him and we laugh. We enjoy ourselves. Where else? Where else can Mr. Skerrit come, as Lennox reminded us, and tell people they must save on $1,000, they must save $200 a month because they don't have to pay transportation. Okay? And then he goes and cries and tells us that we want him to live in a banana shed because people say that $64,000 a month is too much to be paying you. And that's $64,000 on top of everything else. So, my people, elections have consequences. It is against that background that Mr. Skerrit feel comfortable to turn his nose up at us with respect to the $6 billion that he and his friends have holding outside somewhere and must be using for their own good. It is because election has consequences, and he knows that the way he's conducting himself with respect to this electoral reform, that he will not lose office. He can't leave office. There's no way in a regular, true, free and fair election process that Mr. Skerrit will be there up to this point in time, his party. Do you realize that since 2000, as when Mr. Skerrit first entered the parliament, everybody else who was in the parliament at that time, except Vince, has left a long time ago, and Vince was out and he came back recently, and sucking salt, I understand now, on the Skerrit. Everybody else, has come and gone, and Mr. Skerrit has them like a yo-yo. Is that how they do yo-yos? Has them like a yo-yo. I put you on, I take you out. I put you in, I take you out. Now the latest he has done, he has put McIntyre in there as supposed Minister of Finance, but it's he who's telling us everything about finance. That is what's happening. So elections have consequences. And so it's important for you to understand how the system works. What they're doing with this process that they are under control is that they know that there's this pool of Dominicans out there who are not impacted at all by the actions or non-actions that they take in Dominica. And they're there willing to be used by Mr. Skerrit to come back here at the strategic time to vote to put him in office. So they do not want the list to be cleaned because there are three fundamental constitutional requirements that entitle someone to be registered to elect representatives. And Dr. Andrew, I'm sure you're aware of Section 33(2) of the Constitution. That is, you have to be 18 years and over, you have to be a Commonwealth citizen, and you have to be ordinarily resident or domiciled. Here it is, in Dominica. That is important, resident or domiciled in Dominica. So at any time that you no longer satisfy any of those requirements, then you cannot be on the register and your name must be removed. There's provision to remove your name. So if when you were registered first, you were 18 years and over, then you'll always be qualified in that regard, 18 years and over. But your nationality can change. You can be no longer a Commonwealth citizen. You can become a Iranian, or you can become a Saudi Arabia or something so, okay? And also, your residency can change. You understand? So what they're doing is they're recognizing that they have this pool of people over there who are not impacted by anything that they do here. But they have to bring them in. They have to pay to bring them in. So they must have this list so that they can say to you, go to Dominica. There's a name, Sheridan Gregoire, on the list in Granby or Rosa Central or Rosa South. Go there. They know that Sheridan, I'm not going to use Sheridan Gregoire, John Brown, because I'm going to say something I don't want it to be associated with you. They know that John Brown died some time ago in New Jersey. They know he died. His name is on the list here. So they send somebody to the Rosa South, go there and say you are John Brown. They know John Brown is dead, so John Brown has no chance of coming up and saying I'm that person. Under the law as it is now, the relevant electoral official must give that person the ballot to go and vote, even if the election officer knows that that person is not John Brown. But according to the law, you must give the person the ballot. The person who votes, the person has to swear to an oath, and it is understood that on the basis of that oath, the person can be prosecuted sometime in the future. But by 6 o'clock, 6:30, the votes are counted, and that person has contributed to their person winning the elections. They also must have the money to pay to bring those people in. So that is why they will never positively respond to the question of campaign financing, because they must have that money. Where is that money coming from? I said earlier, there are 4 people who are controlling this, Mr. Scarrett. 4 people, okay? And the 2 of those people are the source of the money. But in the end, in the final analysis, that money comes from us, our passport sales, because these are 2 people who substantially hold and control our passport money, okay? That is where the trick is. That is why they cannot and they will not allow, without a fight, the list to be cleaned. They will not allow campaign financing. And the provision that we're seeking to get into the law, I think Dr. Andrew referred to it, to put in the legislation for the avoidance of doubts, the pain of the passage of people to come into Dominica to vote on the expressed or implied basis that they will vote for you is bribery. We want them to put that in the legislation, because the House of Assembly bill as it is now constructed does not specifically talk about bribery in the context of paying for somebody to come in to vote. So we want to put that down in the legislation. They will not put that. Now, they tried it the other day when they were trying to legalize cheating and bribery. They put a provision in a draft bill that for the avoidance of doubt, the bringing of people is not treating a bribery. We want them, now that they know, that we know that the law makes that a bribery, then we want them to put in the law for the avoidance of doubt. They will not do that, because that will be one of the pillars that will be affected. So I want people to understand what this fight is about and why these guys are insisting on doing the things that they're doing and insisting on undermining election. And just quickly on the question of you mentioned it, Mr. Gregoire. The Election Commission's bill has been proposed, provides for the chief elections officer to demit office when he or she will have reached the prescribed age. The Constitution provides for the prescribed age for the holder of the post of chief elections officer to be 55 or any other age as determined by Parliament. So the Parliament can change that age. They did it in the case of the Director of Audit, because there's a similar provision in the Constitution with respect to the Director of Audit. So they changed the age with respect to the Director of Audit some time ago. They can similarly change it. Mr. Byron has recommended that that age be changed to 65 with respect to the Chief Elections Officer. Here's the problem. The current Chief Elections Officer, who has been there for at least 6 years and knows the ropes, understands the ropes, is going to be 55, I'm told, in September. We are now June, July, August, September, in 3 months. Imagine the workload that is going to be involved in this new dispensation. And at this time, you want to take a new person who has to learn the ropes, which this Chief Elections Officer has learned for the last 6 or so years. And he has to be learning that now. At the same time, overseeing the implementation of these major new proposals. That is unconscionable. So the Electoral Commission must stand up and say, this is the work that we have to do. We have to administer the law as it pertains to registration of voters and the conduct of elections. And we want to have a functionary there, chief elections officer, chief registration officer, who has the ability and who can do the work. So we are saying to you, the government, as part of our comments on what you have submitted to us, we want you to change the proposal and allow for the prescribed age to be increased to that recommended by Mr. Byron. But here's a sinister thing. You remember that they have not put in the legislation what should be in the ID card, what should be contained in the ID card. They say they're leaving that to the chief elections officer. Here lies the trick. So they want a chief elections officer who is placed there in their own image and likeness so that he or she can be directed as to what should be put there. Don't put anything about fingerprints because they're very worried about fingerprints. I know that Mr. Skerritt castigated Byron when Byron proposed fingerprints to be included on the ID cards. I know he castigated him and wrote him and told him to take it out. Okay? And I think Byron succumbed there, and Byron decided, I'm going to still put the provision for identification card, but I'm not going to recommend anything. So they want to have something like that, something like that, there, so they can manipulate the system. That is the details of what these guys are involved in. Okay? They are cowards, they're deceitful, they are determined to continue to steal, to continue to ride the people, continue to be dictatorial, and they will do anything to undermine the ability to change that. So that is where we are. So people have to understand that elections have consequences. And so those people in the construction industry, those people who have heavy duty equipment, those people who are struggling, those people in the NEP that Mr. Skerritt has threatened that he can discontinue at the stroke of a pen, those people who are insulting, understand that elections have consequences and stand up. We will continue to talk. Thanks, sir.
I believe that it's not just those people. I think it's everybody, gentlemen. Everybody can chime in now because really, for the next half hour, I want to talk about the solutions. Because I don't know there's anybody in Dominica who's not feeling the pinch right now. The businesses are feeling it. The young people are feeling it. They're migrating in droves. I hear the nurses saying that how many people have retired or left the country and how many nurses have left the country. Teachers probably going, police officers. So, and public servants are not getting enough wage increase to help them to meet the cost of living. We know that the cost of living is going up and the salaries have not gone up. So everybody's feeling the pinch. The farmers are feeling it. The people in manufacturing and the entrepreneurs, the young ones are feeling it. The question is, what do we do and what do the people do? And what it is that can be done to ensure that the people are galvanized to come out and stand up for their rights, to have a better living standard, a better quality of life, by saying we want to do like Antigua and like St. Kitts and like St. Lucia, we see they're progressing, their people are doing better. And because they're changing the government from time to time, they've done the electoral reform. We want ours so that we can have a level playing field, so we can have free and fair elections, so we can do that just as well as St. Lucian. So you don't have to run to St. Kitts and run to the BVI, run to Antigua anymore. So Lennox, I don't know, what are your thoughts on all of that? How do people get mobilized as they did in 1979 to come out and sing from one hymn sheet on the same platform, saying, listen, that is where the buck stops?
Well, people get mobilized out of their own interest in their affairs and their commitment to do something to change the things that are negatively affecting the way they live and the quality of life that they're enjoying. So we have a responsibility to talk about this. And like I said, we have been very civil with it for the better part of the last 2 decades. But after all, this is our business. The business of free and fair elections is the country's business, not one man's business. And where it has come to the stage that it is at right now, where you are seeing the capture of the process, and you're seeing the fact that those who have captured the process will not relent from their evil ways, and they will continue to do what they have to do to keep themselves in the position of authority they have over the people of Dominica, to rape, to plunder their resources. It is time for their own benefit. It is time for the people now to react. So, yes, in terms of what has come before us, the people of Dominica now, there has to be response, written to the government saying, this is what we believe real reform represents in the interest of free and fair elections. So here is what you need to go to the parliament with. It is not what Skerrit wants that is going to the parliament, that must go to the parliament. It's what the people want for their electoral process in terms of revised legislation. And the people now need to get serious about letting Roosevelt Skerrit and his gang understand it is their wishes that are paramount. It is what the people want, not what they want privately. How do you do that? The people have to leave their homes and come out in large numbers on some day, beginning someday soon. And the Electoral Reform Coalition is talking about planning something for the end of the month. We're fully in support of that. And we'll be calling out all of Dominicans to that event once the date is finalized. There has to be a show of dissent, a show of disgust, a show of dissatisfaction with what is happening now, such that those who are going to Parliament understand we're not going there to do what somebody tells us we must do for our own little private interest. We're going there to do the people's work, which is put legislation there that addresses the critical issues of free and fair election for the Commonwealth of Dominica. And sometime before they go to Parliament, the parliamentarians must see thousands of persons in the same place for the same purpose. It says, no, listen, you're going to Parliament the next day. When you go there, you're going there to do our work. Not Skerrit's work, our work, free and fair elections. So those areas in which you're seeking to deform the process, those areas in which you are wanting to maintain the taints on the electoral process, the legislation must get rid of them. And there are specific recommendations for that to happen. And you will have, the government will have those recommendations, those changes, those amendments to its amendments before it. And that is what we expect that they will go there to do. If they don't do that, then the people have to react. But the people must first let them know, listen, it is our business you're going there to do. And for them to understand that, there must be a large gathering of people from all walks of life in Dominica, from every nook and cranny of this country. Because if they don't get the point that this is serious business, they will go to Parliament and do what they want. They cannot go to Parliament with the comfort of feeling that Dominicans are not interested in this, and Dominicans are giving them a pass to continue to do the evil things they have done to the interest of Dominicans. Now is the time for action. People talk about, well, oh, you're talking too much. Well, the action that has to be taken now is action against the government that is continuing to injure the interests of the people, And so there has to be a big gathering before people go to Parliament so they understand what they're going to Parliament to do. And we'll be clear over the next few weeks, over the next few days and weeks about what the changes must be to the legislation before it goes to Parliament. And if the government refuses, then that's a whole horse of a different color, because now the people will have to step it up to the next level that ensures it is their work, it is what they want done, that is going to be done in the Parliament of Dominica for free and fair elections in this democracy. We're done playing games. We're done playing games. We have had this discipline of civility for too long, while we have been savage, while we have been brutalized, while our interest has been set aside for other people to make our country, to put our country at the mercy and for the benefit of others on the outside. And it is time for that to stop. So now, all of those who believe that it is about the political parties, start thinking about your responsibility for the Dominica that you love and in which you operate. The civil society organizations, the business community, the church, all the people of Dominica and their organizations, this is a time for you, because it is our country that is under attack. It is our country that has been taken away from us for the benefit of a few who feel right now so emboldened with their success for the better part of the last 20 years. They think they own this country, they own the people living in this country, and they can do exactly as they please. And the instrumentality for doing exactly as they please is this hold that they have on the electoral process, where we believe we are going into elections and we're going into a free and fair process, like most other places have. And when they go into that free and fair process, then there's accountability. People get changed and parties move on, and parties go into opposition and they come back into government and government changes. And we have lost that right to change government in Dominica because of the machinations of one man and his gang for the benefit of people on the outside who have corrupted them into being their little slaves. And now we're watching the re-enslavement of our entire nation. And we're no longer going to be eyes wide shut. We are no longer going to be eyes wide shut. We are waking up. And as of this month, to do something about it.
Good. Now, Mr. Edison James, I kind of got the impression that you wanted to add something here. So you want to unmute your mic and you can.
Yeah, yes, Sheridan, I agree wholeheartedly with Lennox. I think we have exhausted all that is available to us. The people have spoken at length. There's been consultations, there's been discussions, there have been observers, there have been consultants, there have been legal luminaries, we've done all that. And when we've gone all from here to Timbuktu and back, Mr. Skerritt said, triple, to hell with all you. I'm going to do what I want. Then the people have to stop him. The people have to stop him. So I think when parliamentary representatives want your vote, they come to your home. Yeah, they come to your home. I'm going to suggest that in every constituency, a day next week, a Thursday, I think that's when it's constituency day, a day soon, that as many people as possible decide that they want to see their PAL rep in their constituency, or where they can see them in their constituency. But they must talk to their PAL reps directly, because this is not a presidential system we have. It's each individual elected member. So a day coming soon, if it's a Tuesday, or I think Tuesday is cabinet, or a Thursday, which I understand is constituency day, on one day, everybody, every constituency, seek to get an appointment with your PAL rep to sit down and talk with him or her about this question of our democracy, of electoral reform. And start from there, because they cannot be allowed to get away with this thing hiding under Mr. Skerritt's pants or shirts or his $2,000 shirt. The PAL reps, let's focus on them. They're in your constituency, they're in your village, they're alone there. Go to them. Come, cool, collected, let us talk. Let us talk. Mr. Grant, Mr. Defoe, Malisa, talk to them. So decide on a day next week or week after, whenever. And every PAL rep must be engaged on that day. The same way Mr. Skerritt tell them they must, remember when he cussed them off and tell them they must going to stay in their constituency, so you're going to see them in their constituency. We have to recognize that in the end, the private sector has been emasculated, decimated, all sort of thing now. But they need to come together again. So those people in the private sector who have influence, there are some of them who have influence, seek to get an audience with the cabinet or with Mr. Skerritt or whoever, to say to them, there's something on the horizon. I do not think it's something that we want to happen. So let us talk and let us do the will of the people. So the private sector and the churches, the Christian Council, the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholic Church, the Christian Council, on its own, as the Christian Council, must go to the cabinet, seek an audience with the cabinet, and apprise them of what is coming, because it's going to come. The Association of Evangelical Churches seek an audience with the cabinet, apprise them of what is happening. Talk to your congregation as well. And then those groups, the Seventh-day Adventists, I don't think they're in any of those groups, but they're a big organization. All the Seventh-day Adventist leaders should get together to discuss what is happening, because they're going to be affected as well. The truckers must decide that they're going to be at the forefront of these things. I mean, these guys are sitting there. Sheridan, where I live, I have the opportunity to see the movement of trucks from Hatton Garden, from Roseau, to and from Londonderry. Trucks, foreign trucks, they brought in another 40 the other day, and the truckers are sitting there and making noise and talking among themselves. My friends, get up and at least show a little bit of what is to come. Right now, just give a little warning, the truckers, you understand? And the public servants too. Mr. Later, call another meeting of the public servants. Call another meeting, because a crisis is developing. A crisis is developing. Call another meeting of the public servants. Public servants, be prepared. They cannot break all of you. If two of you come together, they break you. They cannot break the thousands of you. Okay? So do that. Okay? And our business as a political party is to inform, educate. So we're doing that now, and we have to do that out in the constituency. Mr. Linton mentioned it. There's a need for the political parties to be, for the political party, United Workers' Party to be more active in the constituency. The need for the ERC to be active on the ground as well. Okay? The ERC is dealing with electoral reform. There's need for them to have their town hall meetings, and as an ERC, talk to the people about the elements and what they're doing. The political parties will do their thing as well. So let us have that mass coming together. But in the end, I believe it will have to be first a downing of tools. Decide on a day. Let's start. Decide on a day, and with downing tools. Do nothing on that day. Look at that. We said you did a little do nothing the other day. The government decided they're going to do something, and they did it for 3 weeks. They go here. They remember they had something saying do something. Try to mimic what we said. They're following us. So these are some of the things, but there has to be mass protests, as Mr. Linton mentioned, in the final analysis. Mass protests, because our lives and our livelihoods depend on it. I just want to make one other observation to the public. There's this man called Tony Astafan. That is a man who urged Dominicans to kill me, right? And he urged Dominicans to do the same to Julius Timothy and Crazy T in the valley. Remember the famous cockroach speech? Everybody tells you that describing people as cockroach is the biggest dog whistling to tell somebody to kill somebody. That is what the Hutsis and the Tutsis was at the center of their problem. So Tony knew what he was doing. That is a man who urged Dominicans to kill their black brother. I never forget that. I was at Pocasset coming down the road when I heard that guy. And he named me. And he said, when I say cockroach, say Edison James. When I say kakado, say Julius Timothy. And when I say mosquito, say Crazy T. Crazy T is dead now. Julius is in a difficult situation. I'm still alive. But Tony Astafan, who is the guiding spirit, urged that we be killed. And then he went on to say, when I say cockroach, say Edison James, and then what do you take to kill a cockroach? A shoe. That guy wasn't metaphor in anything. Where is Tony Astafan now? Tony Astafan Why ask yourself, why is he not in Dominica, where there's milk and honey flowing, everything is nice and dandy? Where is he? He's in Antigua, and he has you in Dominica catching hell, while he's urging black people to kill each other. Think about this. I'm not urging anybody to kill anybody. I'm saying before we reach anywhere along those lines, let us take stock and let us protect our country. Thanks.
Dr. Andre, you can call anything by any name. I mean, Lennox talked about mass mobilization, mass gatherings. Edison talked about what's to come. The fact of the matter is, all of this, there's a name for it, you know. The name is democracy at work. That is how people show their dissatisfaction, right? When in a democracy, and if you look at the rest of the world, I mean, people in Guadeloupe and Martinique, they have they have all these organizations all the time. They have these mass rallies and so on, and people make their issues known, and the politicians, the political directorate sees about it. You have everything in Canada. You see all the students demonstrating all over the place. Some of them are pro PRO, some of them pro Palestinian, some of them are pro Israel. People are demonstrating everywhere. You see it in the United States, you see it everywhere. It is called democracy at work. You can't do that in a dictatorship. You cannot do that there, but in a democracy, you have the right to show your dissatisfaction. And let us face it, Edison James mentioned the question of elections have consequences. We've been saying so for years. And we have to look at the consequences, and I hope you can look at that for Dr. Andre, because the consequences of a tainted election left Dominicans in a hole for the last 20 something years. Anybody who was born 35 years ago, they've only known this government. So any of those young people who do not have a job or who cannot pay their bills, this is the consequence of tainted elections. Elections are not free and fair. Where people had choices to change their government now and then to ensure that the governments perform, as Mr. Edison James was saying. But when you have another way of winning the majority without performing, the people suffer. And that is now manifests itself in the fact that people cannot have a decent standard of living. And a lot of people may not want to say so openly, but I mean, a lot of people maybe support the government are probably saying so quietly because they cannot pay the bills. That's the point. They just cannot make the ends meet. The farmers are suffering. All the professionals in the healthcare sector, every sector, people are suffering. So I think when Lennox and Edison and other like-minded people are saying, people have to make their thoughts known because they're suffering too much. It is time for them to get together and say to the political directorate, enough is enough. We've had enough. We need to fix that. Electoral reform is something we want now. This is the reforms that we want, and we need to have it now. Dr. Andre?
Before Dr. Andre,
Yeah.
let me just reference something that Edison James had mentioned earlier, and that is the one of the admonitions we got from the Caribbean Court of Justice in July of 2022, which says, and I'm quoting here, without free and fair elections, the preambular value of the creation and maintenance of and respect for lawfully constituted authority would be fatally undermined. The consequences of such a denial that a reflection on Caribbean history demonstrates include loss of legitimacy, public unrest, and even revolt. In contemporary terms, free and fair elections are so fundamental to the democratic way of life that without it, the very legitimacy and sovereignty of the constitutional state is brought into question. End of quote.
Yes. Dr. Andre, I think that is something you can take up from there because it seems to me that these are the facts.
Unfortunate, they are the facts and they constitute an inconvenient truth. To put it succinctly, these proposed electoral bills constitute nothing more than a fatal wounding of democracy in Dominica. Nothing more, nothing less. And what will be the result? Workers being dismissed or furloughed, unpaid bills, significant debt owed to regional universities, debt owed to local businesses, unpaid LPOs, workers not being given an opportunity in their own land, NEP workers getting angry and striking frenziedly at the door to a credit union, persons having to resort to nefarious means to earn a living, persons bearing witness to the exploitation of their children, truckers not being able to pay for their trucks, persons not being able to pay their outstanding mortgages or their vehicles, persons not being able to shop at the market. And you must ask yourselves, those of us or you who are in that dire predicament, ask yourself one question. Zopa Muntu? Zopa Muntu? You have to watch foreigners get rich at your expense. You have to watch foreign companies being given significant tax exemptions. You have to watch companies being given corporate welfare. You have to watch your leader going to seek aid dressed in a Gucci or Versace shirt. You have to watch your leader wearing a $3,000 shoe at a time when you can't afford to buy one for $100. That is the sad and unfortunate reality of the insistence that you should do nothing to alleviate your plight in your own country. Mr. James correctly stated that the role of the party is to inform and educate. Let me add one other role: to motivate, to get the people to stand up. I know they are sitting on wonderful cushions of comfort. I know they are sitting on wonderful, comfortable chairs, which enable them not to rock the boat and be identified, or should I say, be victimized. But if everybody reach out to the left and to the right and join hats and hands with fellow sufferers, with those who, quite frankly, should take up the fight to protect their interests and their future and those, their children. Do you enjoy seeing your children without jobs? Do you enjoy seeing your children beg for crumbs? Do you enjoy seeing your children exploited for sexual favors in exchange for some handout? What do you have to sacrifice to get some type of dispensation from the political directorate? Your son? Your daughter? Your spouse? Who do you have to sacrifice? And why should you have to sacrifice? Bon Dieu, surely we deserve better than that. Surely there is a pillar of decency and inner strength that you must be prepared to stand up upon and say enough is enough. And that is what you should think of when you think about that legislation and those proposed electoral bills that constitute nothing more than a noose, not just around the neck of democracy, but around the neck of patriotic Dominicans who are longing for meaningful change in their lives and in their country. And if they don't realize that in 2024, when will they realize that within or the future of their country rests upon what they're prepared to do to save it, to rescue it, to give it hope, to give it life, to set an example for their children? Bear in mind one thing: an example is worth 1,000 words. Standing up is worth 1,000 lectures. And there is nothing like taking action to protect your own and to achieve your own salvation, not upstairs in heaven, but right here on earth. And it is all possible if you are prepared to stand together. Thank you.
Mr. James, well, it's kind of time for us to wrap it up. I just wanted to see if you had some parting comments that you wanted to make as we go around the table. You need to unmute your mic so that we can hear you.
Yeah, just to say, it was a pleasure being on the program with you and Dr. Andre, Lennox, and Lambe this evening. I trust we have moved the needle in some way, form, or shape towards encouraging our people to appreciate what we are in, the struggle that we are in, to recognize that it is in their hands, our people, it's in our hands to ensure that we do not fall further into the dictatorship, pit that is in front of us. I go back to what I said earlier, that in my youthful days when I heard about a dictator, I thought about Hitler and the atrocities that he had been involved in, people dying and so on. And so I shudder, even at this stage, in the twilight of my years, when I recognize that our country is so very close to that situation. And I just gave the story a while ago, or it reminded us that one of the advisors of Mr. Skerritt had no difficulty in urging that death be visited on one of us. We have a situation now where our political leaders have been persecuted, and have even ended up in jail. And to me, that is probably one short step from reaching the stage where the dictator reached way back in the early part of the century. So the people must recognize where we are. It is no longer a joke, if it was ever a joke. It is serious business. This gentleman has decided that all 65 of us must be his torso. He can insult us how he wants. He can deride us how he wants. He can deny us an opportunity to earn a decent livelihood while he is living it up. I mean, when a man stands there with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of clothes on him and tell you foolishness about saving $200 on $1,000 salary, it's just deriding you. It's just contempt for you. Okay, and he feels he can do all these things to you, and he can never lose his position as prime minister because of the manipulations that he is doing. Okay, Mr. Skerritt is giving the impression he cannot live, and not only an impression, many people have a right to conclude he cannot live outside the prime ministership. So he'll tell us 1,000 times that this is his last year. 2025 is his last year. It was some years ago, but he cannot leave the prime ministership. I don't know why. He'll probably explain to us. But it is you, the people, who must take a stand. And so it is an urging to you to stand up and be counted, and let your voices be heard, let your actions be seen, so that we can rescue our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. James. And Lennox, it sounds to me like it is time for action.
It is. And the reason it's time for action is because what we have before us, said by Mrs. Garrett to be amendments to legislations to give effect to electoral reform, do not address the issue of free and fair elections in Dominica, do not address the issue of do not address the taints on the electoral process that need to be removed. And they're all about protecting the re-election legacy of Roosevelt Skerritt, which goes back to 2008. And that famous email that Edison James referenced earlier from Anthony Estefan to Roosevelt Skerritt, copied to Alec Lawrence, and at the time, or probably still is, Roosevelt Skerritt's political advisor, Hartley Henry. 27th of March, 2008, 16 years ago. Brother, please do not drift too far. Tried calling you again today and just cannot get through. I spoke to Kondwani this morning. There is madness going on at the Electoral Commission. You need to call in Richard Charles and Kondwani Williams. I leave today. These guys are talking about reforms to include ID cards, and complete re-registration. Such reforms will undermine your re-election legacy, as the opposition will say, look, the commission agreed with us. Reform was required because of widespread fraud. Let me say, in 2008, Roosevelt Skerrit had no re-election legacy to talk about. He had won his first election as the head of the Labour Party in 2005. So they had already planned just around that time that he was going to be re-elected and re-elected and re-elected through fraud on the voters of Dominica, through trickery, through deception, through rigging of elections. He was going to succeed. And no way they were going to allow any reforms of the process that would allow for things like ID cards to halt the fraud, re-registration of voters of the list, re-registration of voters to clean the list, etc. None of that was going to happen because that would undermine his re-election legacy. Because that is where we find ourselves today, still with the obsession of protecting Roosevelt Skerrit's emerging from election with results in his favor over and over and over again, because that's where we still are. And because this new round of amended legislation and new legislation to go before Parliament is pretty much in that zone, the amendments that they are proposing is pretty much in the zone of protecting the re-election legacy and denying the people of Dominica, continuing to deny the people of Dominica the right to free and fair elections. The people of Dominica must respond, and the people of Dominica must respond decisively and forcefully to get what the people of Dominica want, because this is our country, not the country of one man that can treat us as his colony of fools to do as he pleases and to place our resources to the benefit of outsiders of his choosing. It is wrong. It is totally unacceptable, and we can no longer stand for it in Dominica. That is why, in the course of this month, there will be massive protest action, and there'll be large gatherings of people to say no to the proposed legislation to go before Parliament. We will put forward what is to go there, which is the people's work, and that is what we expect the people to insist on from all walks of life in Dominica. Thank you, Sheridan.
Thank you, Lennox.
Thank you, Mr. James. Thank you, Dr. Andre. Lambi,
So, Dr.
thank you very
Andre,
much, Mom. People of Dominica love you all the time.
Let me just come to you for your final remarks, Dr. Andre. It seems to me that the political directorate is doing everything possible to protect the legacy of one man, to remain in power for as long as he would like to. But of course, of great concern to the people should be the fact that while this has been happening, they've not been able to change the government because there's been no free and fair elections. And because these elections have consequences, and tainted elections have major, major negative consequences, which all of the rest of the people whose legacy is not being considered. Mr. Edison just mentioned some of them. You have the truckers, you have the bus drivers, you have the teachers, you have the firemen, the police officers, you have all these public officers, you have farmers, you have students, you have young people who are graduating and want a job. You have young entrepreneurs who are trying to make a living by adding value to local raw materials. Nobody is talking about the legacy of these people. They're not even talking about giving these people a decent standard of living, a different quality of life, so that they can succeed right there in their own country. Instead, because these elections have consequences, one of these negative consequences is having foreigners taking all the bread while the locals stand aside and look. Dr. Andre, your closing comments?
Well, first of all, let me commend Mr. James and Mr. Linton and yourself for your excellent submissions this evening. I think you were all batting in good form, and I think the West Indies team could take a leaf from your tree, so to speak. Let me thank the listeners who've stayed up to listen to us as we look at our twilight fastly approaching, and as we watch with great regret and sorrow the impending implosion of our democracy. The forces of darkness are concerned with the undermining of the electoral legacy of the potentate. in office in Dominica today. Patriotic Dominicans must be concerned about the systematic undermining of our democracy. We are fighting the good fight. Our fight is noble. It is something to be proud of. It hasn't been marinated in selfishness or greed. It hasn't been marinated into a lust for power. It hasn't been marinated into a consistent and persistent desire to crush all opponents, to victimize them, to persecute them, to see them suffer, to deprive them of opportunities, and to gloat over the brutalizing of one's people. How unprecedented. During the French Revolution, almost 2 centuries ago, the arrogance of the aristocracy was captured by this famous line from Marie Antoinette, "Let them eat cake." This administration do not even want to see those who oppose it eat cake. They don't want to see them eat at all. And the question is, do we simply accept that fate, like lambs being led to the slaughter? Or do we say enough is enough? We have a stake in this country where our fathers, our grandfathers, and great-grandfathers eked out a living, where our great-great-grandfathers and mothers were slaves, were brutalized, were victimized. And they lived a life of hardship to ensure that successive generations will not suffer the same fate. So here we are, facing the most dangerous threat to our existence. And you know why it hurts so much? It is your own. It is your own, garçon. C'est pas Béké qui a fait ça. It's your own. With no shame. Your own is taken from you and given to foreigners and making them ambassadors and making them buy $100 million properties in Dubai with no sense of shame. And you are telling me that I must take those licks in silence. I must praise God for giving us such a wonderful political leadership, a leadership that is crushing its very own. But wasn't it Martin Luther King which says that crushed stone will rise again? And wasn't there a book which said the stone that the builder refused will become the head cornerstone? But we have to give effect to those biblical prophecy. We cannot simply read the good book and close its pages and pray for manna from heaven. We have to bake that bread of freedom. And we have to ensure that it is sold at a price where everyone can afford it and be nourished by it and be motivated by it, to ensure that whatever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. We have to be animated by these cherished values, not by the snake of selfishness that is eating away, that is strangling our country and all those who are within it. Stand up, take your country. Good night.
Good night, Dr. Andre and Edison and Lennox. I just want to close up by saying, listen, I think it is right that Dominicans should come out and stand for their democracy and stand for themselves, for the future of the children. Stand up for the families. I think it's simple as that. You cannot allow your democracy to be taken away from you. You cannot allow your right to choose a government of your choice to be taken away from you. And so I think this is a good reason why Dominicans must stand up and come out in their mass numbers to make this statement that, listen, we value our freedom, our democracy, and we do not like the idea that our elections are being manipulated. And now that we're seeing evidence that there's further manipulation in the making, by trying to put reforms that are going to just strengthen the willing legacy of one person. So, gentlemen, I thank you so much for coming here tonight. And I thank all the persons who are with us on Q95, on the audio and on the video and on the Facebook and on the YouTube. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Lennox and Edison and Irving and Lambie and Sherwin. Thank you so much. I think we learned a bit here tonight. And Lennox, I'm very pleased about the fact that there is some effort to get some mass action to explain to our government that we value our freedom and our democracy.
Absolutely.
So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night. Yeah, now you put this off.
Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na.